Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. First of all, I want to thank all of you for the support in my last video. That is much appreciated. I was not expecting it. It is quite motivating to me and I'm definitely looking forward to putting out more content. I also want to say that I'm open to your feedback in the comments. Let me know if you disagree with anything that I'm saying or if you have any advice or tips for how I could be better in this endeavor. So today I want to talk about how to understand the mind. And as a caveat that maybe doesn't have to be said, but I'll say it anyway, I just got accepted into a master's program in psychology, so I'm beginning my formal studies. And I say that to say that I am no point of authority on this matter. I've read a few books that I felt were interesting, and this is my attempt to synthesize that information, and I'll also put those books in the description and hopefully I'll cite them correctly throughout so that way you can see where I'm pulling these ideas from and read through them if you're interested. So before we get started, why is it interesting to understand the mind? Well, from the last video, as I stated, my ultimate goal is to reduce the most amount of unnecessary suffering for the most amount of people. And part of doing that means that I have to understand who I am. And so I have to battle my own ignorance when it comes to how I think and how I behave. And there's a quote by Karl Rogers. He was a famous American psychotherapist, and he said that what is most personal is most general. And so it's my belief that as you begin to understand yourself more, you can then offer those same thoughts or overlay those same paradigms and ideas onto other people. And ideally, this would facilitate empathy and grace with yourself across time, but also with other people. I also think that having a useful theory for understanding your mind will help you understand how other people see the world and how they behave. And ideally, this would lead to this increase in understanding would lead to more grace. So, how to understand the mind. I'm going to be pulling from primarily two theories. One is called active inference, and that's in a book called Active Inference by Karl Friston. And then another is the New Executive Brain by Elkhonon and Goldberg. So active inference starts with a primary assumption, and that assumption is that an organism wants to maintain itself in its environment as well as maintaining itself across environments. And one of the ways that it does this is by reducing prediction error. Prediction error has many names, many labels. Entropy, surprise, variational free energy, I believe is the term that Dr. Friston actually uses, but I'm going to say prediction error throughout this video. What is prediction error? Well, as you're navigating the world, you have a model of how you think things should go. You have desires, beliefs. You have a presumed understanding of how the world works as well as how you want the world to work. And so this is your internal model. And then as you're interacting with the world, you're navigating the environment, there's how the world actually is. So you have two parts here. You have your internal model, and then you have what actually happens in the world given the sense data that you can observe. Technically, you can't really observe everything that's going on in the world, and so you're seeing an external model. But for now, let's just keep it simple. You have an internal model, which consists of your belief system and what you desire to have happen in the world, and then there's what actually happens in the world. Prediction error is the gap between your model and the world. It's the distance between your expectations and what truly manifests in the form of sense data that you can observe. The idea is that if an organism can reduce the prediction error, then its model of the world, its understanding of its environment, is adequately fit and adaptable for it to maintain itself across time. Some of those other words that I use to describe prediction error, such as surprise, maybe is more useful in conceptualizing prediction error. And so what does that actually look like when there is an error? So you're going through the environment, You think you understand everything that's going on. Something anomalous occurs, something unknown. And what happens is you become anxious, and we'll talk about how emotions layer into this later. But that anxiety is a signal that there's been an increase in entropy, an increase in surprise, and that your prediction error has increased. And so now what could happen is that, well, you could die. We have this tendency to be biased towards anomaly and things that are the unknown, because what's in the unknown could kill you and prevent you from maintaining yourself across environments. So that's what prediction error is. And the starting assumption from active inference is that to maintain yourself across environments, you need to reduce that prediction error. So the mind is evolution's solution to regulating, sensing, and reducing prediction error. I like to think of the mind as an amalgamation of inorganic matter, organic matter, society, and cognition. I think that it's the Gestalt, which is a German word for the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I think that it's something that cannot be reduced down to the brain or nervous system or the body, although it's involved, although it entails all of those aspects. I think that the mind is the, what would you say, emergent process for sensing and reducing prediction error. And how exactly does it do this? So backing up a little bit, let's describe the environment. The environment is a general term. It could be the physical objects around you. It could be society. It could be your projected thoughts out into the environment about what you think is out there. But let's just say the environment is quite a broad term. In the environment is a near infinite amount of facts, but not all of those facts are important to you, the organism. And so within that near infinite set of facts are important facts that are meaningful to you, and we could say that those are salient facts. They have salience. We can abstract up from the environment of infinite facts to the salience landscape, as John Vervaeke calls it. Of those salient facts, you can only attend to so many of those given our limitations of information processing, for example, as well as other constraints. And so attention is the selection of those salient facts, so that way you can hone in on them and use them to obtain whatever goals you have. And that's a key aspect there as well. Your attention is a function of your value hierarchy. Your values, of course, your desires, your goals, the things that you want. Some of those values are unconscious. Some of them are conscious. Some of them are biologically instantiated, as in the desire to not be too hungry, to not be too cold or too hot. Some of those are socially mediated as well as biologically mediated, meaning that, or for an example, we don't want to be socially isolated. And then, of course, we have some goals that we can create of our own intellect. So given our value hierarchy, we attend to the world in a manner that excludes a lot of, definitely most of the near infinite amount of facts that I initially laid out in the environment, but also much of the salience landscape. Now, given that we've attended to a small subset of meaningful data, we're going to interact with this data. We're going to interact with this aspect in the environment given our model. And if we act in the world and what we want to have happen happens, well, then we continue on with our day. And if we act in the world and what we want to have happen does not happen, well, then we have to engage in some sort of exploratory activity in order to close that prediction error. So when an anomaly occurs, that's the increase in prediction error. And here, the mind has, it's one way, but you can think of it as two ways to ameliorate the situation. And this is called the perception action loop. And so perception is changing your mind to better fit the data in the world. So that's one way to close that prediction error. You change your mind to fit the world. And then action is changing the world to better fit your mind or better fit your model. So let's dive a little deeper into perception. as I stated, you have an internal model about the world, and you can think of this model as being represented statistically using Bayesian logic. And you could think of this model as a generative model of probabilistic terms, where you have your prior beliefs, so this is what you desire to have happen, and then you have the likelihood of a probability or a phenomenon occurring in the world given evidence. And so you multiply these two probabilities together, and that's your initial model for how you think the world should work. And so to perceive is to change that model. It's to adjust those probabilities to better fit the actual sense data that you've just encountered. So that's perception. Action is to gather new sense data to better fit your generative model. So your model stays the same, your understanding of the world, your desire for what happens, what you want to have happen remains the same. And action is physically moving in the world to obtain new sense data to fit your model. And so I tried to think of an example of this when I was on my run this morning. So I was running around at around 4:50 in the morning, still quite dark. I also feel like my vision is going as I'm aging, which makes me sad, but that's okay. So as I'm running, oftentimes when I'm looking out into the distance, again, it's very dark out, I might see some movement off in the horizon, or 100 meters or so in front of me. And part of me might think, I can notice my internal model offering up suggestions, like, oh, is that a car? Is that a person? Is that a tree branch? And so one of the ways, so this anomaly manifests, and the prediction error increases. I get anxious. I'm trying to figure out what this is. I have a urge to close that prediction error, to close that gap. And so I can change my mind, which is to hone in on one model and exclude all the others. And this would be perception. And so I'm going to, in my mind, think, okay, that's definitely a tree branch. Okay. Once I hone in on that model, my body then calms down because I've told myself that I know what this is. Another way I can decrease prediction error is this is naturally going to occur as I'm running, I'm going to move closer to it to gather more sense data. So from the initial distance where I was at, it was low resolution and I couldn't really see it. And so I was making a whole bunch of judgment calls and assumptions. But as I get closer to it, I'm gathering new sense data, which will then reinforce my current model of what was happening. And the reason that it's called a perception action loop is because when you act in the world and you gather new sense data, that's going to change how you perceive the world. And as you're changing your perceptions, well, that's going to change how you act in the world. And so perception and action are complementary phenomena that the mind uses to reduce prediction error. And then quickly, just want to talk about emotions as a function of prediction error. As I already alluded to, as prediction error increases, you receive or feel more negative emotion, and as prediction error decreases, you feel positive emotion. And this reminds me of Elkhonon and Goldberg's theory of novelty, routinization, hemispheric lateralization. And so, of course, most people know your brain is bifurcated into two hemispheres. You have a right and a left hemisphere. And Goldberg asserted that the right hemisphere was better suited for novelty and the left hemisphere was better suited for routinization. And as you're encountering things that are novel, the right hemisphere is a little more activated, and it's also the seat of negative emotion. And part of the reason, or part of the theory for the reason behind that, is that you need negative emotion to motivate you to explore when you encounter something unknown, because as I stated previously, in the unknown could be potentially something good, but it could also be death. And so you need something to push you forward, to put you on alert, to be prepared for whatever is happening, because your model is not good enough in that current environment. And then the left hemisphere is for routine, it's for habits, it's for the facilitation of actions that you know will manifest the desired result. And it's also the seat of positive emotion. And so if you act in the world and you get what you want, you get a little hit of dopamine, and that reinforces the patterns of thinking and behavior that led up to those desired results. Okay, so how does the mind work? Quick summary. We exist in an environment that has a near infinite set of facts. Only some of those facts are meaningful to us. And of those facts that are meaningful to us, we attend to a small subset of them given our value hierarchy. As we're attending to facts and we're engaging in the environment, anomaly is going to occur, and we can then activate that perception action loop to close or to decrease the prediction error, because our ultimate goal is to maintain ourselves in our environment. So given this theory of how the mind works, how can this be applicable to our lives, to ourselves, to our social relationships? Well, one of the ways that I think it could be helpful is it gives us a map for understanding negative emotion. Oftentimes when we're encountering other people, or when we're dealing with ourselves, or when we're dealing with other people, we just see the negative emotion. Well, first of all, generally speaking, typically people are normal and going about their own day. But as far as like when a problem arises, we just see that there's negative emotion there, or we feel the negative emotion ourselves. And so using negative emotion as the starting point and then applying this theory, we can start to ask better questions. Again, negative emotion typically would arise if there's a prediction error. And so if you're trying to console someone, or if you're trying to empathize with another person, you can ask certain questions. Well, what happened and what did you want to have happen? And maybe this person doesn't even know what they wanted to have happen. They don't know their desires. It's common that we aren't transparent to ourselves. And here I'm taking from Iain McGilChrist in The Master and His Emissary. It's something like 99% of our processing is unconscious. And so we definitely aren't transparent to ourselves. So when someone's going through it, it's useful to be able to ask the right questions to help them process it. What did they want to have happen? Again, maybe they don't know it. And so, well, you start to explore there with them. Maybe they know what they wanted to have happen, but there were certain behaviors or circumstances that got in the way. And so you can then explore in that direction. I was thinking about this on my run this morning. I believe this theory to be useful in understanding guilt and shame. And so I have many bad habits that I'm trying to fix. One of them being trying to eat less junk food and just eat better. And as I think about myself, what is interesting is that I'll eat something that's bad for me. I know that it feels good in the moment. It feels good leading up to it. The anticipation of eating that ice cream is great, but then afterwards I feel really bad about myself. And so from an active inference perspective, the way I think about this is that each model that we have about the world could be thought of as a self. You have many selves. I believe the saying is you're not the master in your own house. We have different sub-personalities. The you that's angry is different from the you that's lustful. That's different from the you that's hungry. That's different from the you that's charismatic. And all of these have accompanying internal models of the world. And so as I was about to get the ice cream and as I was eating it, I was adopting a model that had the desire to eat the ice cream. And so my prediction error was decreasing because I wanted the ice cream. It was there. I was tasting it and it was good. But after the fact, once I'm done eating the ice cream, I seem to adopt a new model. And this is the one that I want to always be inhabiting. And this is the model of, trying to be healthy and trying to be fit. And so after I'm done eating the ice cream, I adopt that new model, which then looks back on that previous sense data that I had using my memory, and that prediction error spikes and it increases because as I shifted models, the prediction error was initially it was large, and then I ate the ice cream and it decreased, and then it's increasing again as I'm shifting my model. And so that negative emotion after the fact, which to me seems like guilt, could possibly be explained using this model. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. To try to sum up, it's important to understand your mind as an aspect of who you are and as an aspect of who other people are. It's helpful. This knowledge could be helpful because you get to understand how people act and how people see the world. And in my opinion, the more that we can understand each other, the easier it will be for us to empathize with one another and to give each other grace. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next video.